ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our session. My name is Ioulia Konstantinou, and I will be chairing this session. I'm a doctoral researcher at VUB, the Free University of Brussels, at the research group on law, science, technology, and society. Today we are discussing user empowerment technologies for privacy, regulation, and compliance. These are new types of privacy technologies and tools that provide users with more control over personal information and enable more effective privacy notice and choice. These technologies can also facilitate privacy compliance and assist DPAs and other regulators to identify problematic areas for enforcement. This panel will highlight some of these technologies and their added value to privacy by design. So without any further delay, I'm going to introduce my fellow panelists. On my right hand, our moderator, Christopher Docksey. He is the immediate past director of the EDPS, and before that, he was the European Commission's legal advisor on data protection. He's currently editing a commentary on the GDPR to be published by Oxford University Press, together with Christopher Kuhner and Lee Bygrave. Next to him, we have Cameron Russell, the executive director of the Center on Law and Information Policy, and a professor of trademark information, privacy, and copyright law at Fordham Law School in New York. Next to him, Thanasis Zigomitros, a PhD candidate at the University of Piraeus. His research interests include privacy-preserving data publishing, multimedia privacy, and digital watermarking. He held a scholarship from the Research Center Athena in the research area of privacy protection. And I have the ladies of the panel. Florence Raynal, the Deputy Director and Head of the Department of European and International Affairs at the Commission Nationale de l'Informatique et de Liberté, the French Data Protection Authority, who has been also working intensively on the Article 29 Working Party implementation of the GDPR and the setting of the European Data Protection Board and the Privacy Shield. And last but not least, we have Kristina Irion, and is a Marie Curie Fellow at the Institute for Information Law at the University of Amsterdam, and she's Associate Professor on the School of Public Policy at the Central European University in Budapest, in Hungary. So I'm now giving the floor to Chris to kick off our discussion.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Julia. Is that working? Good morning, everybody. Website policies can be very confusing. They can be very difficult for users to understand. So what this panel is about today is about whether the new technologies can be used to extract meaning and present in an understandable form information that can be used by consumers, regulators. And if I remind you, there were 4 challenges set for the panel to identify the latest privacy technologies that can empower users, identify how they can help regulators improve enforcement, see how they can help companies comply with their legal obligations, and also to see whether they provide privacy bridges for international data transfers. So we have, as it were, 4 groups targeted by these technologies. We've got users, regulators, and companies in the industry itself. So during this panel, what we need to be looking out for are what are the issues that are most salient for these different groups, for consumers or regulators or companies. You know, what will have the most impact? And we've got 2 sets of twins, as it were, here. We've got Cameron and Athanasios who are going to present their technologies, a technology which gives scores to websites, a technology which gives us a dashboard that we can use. Then we have another set of twins looking at it from the regulatory angle. We've got Kristina, who's looking at the regulatory angle from an academic perspective, to see how the privacy bridges can help. And we've got Florence, our well-known regulator from the CNIL, who's going to give us the pure regulators approach and see what can be useful in this. So without further ado, let's ask Fordham to kick off. Thank you very much Fordham for hosting this panel. Cameron, please tell us about your project.
We're very excited to be able to tell you a little bit about our project in 5 to 10 minutes. This has been a 4-year project. I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of people, mostly computer scientists, and I'm one of a few attorneys on this team, so I'll give it a shot. This is, if I could get the slides when you are able, yeah. So this is a part of an inter-institution, interdisciplinary research project, multi-year project, as I mentioned, of all of these institutions currently working on it together, so it is very exciting. It's a combination of computer science and law and policy. And the objective is to assist users to better understand and to better glean information from online privacy content. And eventually, hopefully, to empower consumers, giving them meaningful information and accordingly more choice. And so this is making U.S. privacy policies more usable and using machine learning, natural language processing, crowdsourcing, computer science techniques to do so. And the eventual goal is to develop automated computer tools to assist users in an online environment. And so the project is, although there's an international flair to it in terms of our research team, it is specific to the U.S. legal landscape. And hopefully the techniques and tools are valuable elsewhere. But it's currently specific to the system of governance in the United States, which is the system of notice and choice, meaning that an internet user theoretically has a choice having access to a privacy policy via the website or other network-connected mechanism. So the issues with this system of governance are well documented, but perhaps a little bit of review class. People don't read them. If you read them, they're too long to read. They're generalized. If you read them, you might not glean too much information from them. They can be vague and ambiguous and not specific. But then on the flip side, if you actually spelled out practices, policies, specifics, it would be too long and people definitely wouldn't read them, definitely wouldn't understand if you articulated in great detail all of the various data practices. So the objective here again is to provide a shorthand resource. And we have to answer questions like, if we're providing some type of shorthand resource, what does it say in limited space? How these tools looking forward might translate to mobile, might translate to consent models in the Internet of Things. So the first question we had to tackle is, can anyone actually interpret what these privacy policies say? So this is an example of how we sought to label or interpret privacy policies. The types of things we ask annotators or people reading the policy and answering questions about them to do. And so we found that people just can't agree. And then we had different subsets of people. We had crowd workers. We had what we called knowledgeable readers, which were essentially law students. And we had a group of privacy experts all read the same policies. And even privacy experts as a group couldn't agree on all of the interpretations of privacy policies. So this was a challenge for us going into it. Here's another iteration of our annotation tool. We started with humans annotating real privacy policies. We asked them to label certain things within the annotation tool, and this is what we use to kind of feed our data set. So even with these interpretation tools, we're hopeful that the tools can assist to identify ambiguity. So this is one of the points of value of our project, we believe. To develop a dictionary of vague terms, to flag poorly drafted language, and to identify specific things that people cannot interpret and in turn can't train computers to interpret. So a type of empirical evidence as to ambiguity along with automated recognition of ambiguity. So at a minimum, we hope that it will give industry the tools to improve drafting privacy policies. For example, industry can be on the lookout for various categories and types. So you can see on the slide that we've categorized vague terms into conditional language, generalized language, vague likelihood of action, and numeric quantifiers. So not sure exactly how many times or how many different information types. And so now we're able to break down privacy statements and privacy policies like this. So this is an example of how we could annotate a particular provision in a privacy policy within those categories of vague language. And so then the next step that we've been able to do is building a taxonomy of vague terms. And then we're able to gauge the relative ambiguity of privacy statements. So here's what we call a vagueness lattice, which the vagueness increases as you compound ambiguous terms. So with this type of technique, we're hoping to score vagueness. In addition to computer science, we're also using human annotators to gauge relative vagueness by giving them questions like this: which one of these two is more clear, is a more clear description of the company's treatment of personal information? So we've developed methods to show that certain terms are more ambiguous than others. And with our ambiguity research, we anticipate that we will be able to provide a lot of value from this. So some technical tools using natural language processing, machine learning to scan and extract vague language, so to earmark it, to shine a light on it and say this could be better. Some type of guideline saying avoid this type of series of vague language. And also some type of reporting of vague language or scoring of vague language among websites, which we hope will have a ratcheting up effect, so that improving the clarity through market forces even over time. So with the challenges in mind, with our challenges in mind, we're working on different types of user tools. Okay, so we know that some things are going to be difficult to interpret, and we have to kind of work around those types of issues. But eventually, we are eyeing a plugin, a browser plugin. But in addition, we're now developing first a personal privacy assistant that can selectively inform the user about practices they either care most about or wouldn't expect from a website based on our research, and then help the user discover and configure available settings, so providing actual choices responsive to things they care about or may not expect. In addition, based on our research, we've built a website where users have a shorthand resource to glean information about websites they visit. We call that the Explore site. I have a stack of business cards here. You could take one and check it out after the panel. So here's the URL. It's explore.usableprivacy.org. And users can glean various information from the site. They can see the existence and prevalence of different types of data practices in privacy policies of different websites. They can compare websites. This particular one is based on a corpus of websites. It's not pulling from live websites yet. It's built on a fixed data set at this point, but we're hoping to employ the same techniques across live websites as they change. The Explore site also allows internet users to see websites' privacy policies in terms of what the data practices are. So here in the slide, you can see in the color coding that it's showing the prevalence of provisions that relate to first-party collection and use, and then a reduced amount of provisions related to third-party sharing. 0, in this case, provisions that address data retention. And so it allows the user to kind of, in a shorthand way, see the contents of the website without, the general contents of the website without reading the entire thing. Here you can also see this kind of on your far right, the grid that shows the rectangle that's color coded. That's the overall privacy policy and where the various data practices are addressed within the overall privacy policy. So this is kind of how we're thinking of it at the current time in terms of our Explore site. Again, the goal is to be able to do this in an automated way across the entire internet without the need for websites' cooperation, but currently we're working within a fixed corpus of privacy policies to try to get things right. there's a lot of, okay. So we're also working on methods to make opt-outs more visible to users. And so we're trying to incorporate this functionality into the various tools that we're working on. And so here's kind of showing within our Explore website how that is incorporated there. So that's the website. A third thing that we're currently working on is using semantic reasoning to seek to answer user queries about websites' privacy practices. So a Siri-type query answering system for privacy policies. And we have water. And so we're hopeful that we'll eventually be able to answer these types of questions of queries for regulators and researchers, so that regulators and researchers can ask a specific question about data practices, and the tool can provide a responsive answer. We're currently putting a bit of work into that. Lastly, our team's developed a compliance tool specific for mobile apps, and we think this is a really neat one. So the tool seeks to automatically analyze mobile apps for potential privacy requirement inconsistencies. So using machine learning to first analyze privacy policy text, and then match that using code analysis to evaluate what the app's actually doing in the background, the in-fact practice of the mobile application in the background, and then see if there's a mismatch there in terms of what they say they're not going to do, but in fact doing, for example, which would be a deceptive practice. So this is what the privacy statement says they will do or won't do, and this is what is actually happening in the background of the app. The other aspect of the mobile app compliance tool is that we're hoping to use the same type of functionality to map those types of things against what the mobile app is legally required to do. Of course, we need the legal requirement in order to map that. And so that would be to try to find not just deceptive practices in terms of FTC or state unfair and deceptive trade practice jurisdiction, but also legislative requirements, and try to find potential privacy requirement inconsistencies for mobile apps. So, of course, this type of mobile compliance tool, just to troubleshoot one thing that might be said, is not a definitive statement of non-compliance, but using machine learning to kind of shine a light, a valuable tool for regulators to take a vast data set and be able to shine a light in particular directions to take a further look. So this is a quick overview, I hope, of the array of tools that we're working on developing, the things we've developed so far and working on developing. In over 4 years, we think we've been able to do some interesting things. It turns out we found that you can understand quite a bit just by looking at a privacy policy and looking at privacy statements.
Thanks a lot, Cameron. So as I understand it, your technology is using people first, these crowdsourcers, to address privacy policies. And you're hoping your machine learning will take over so you can move from hundreds to thousands of websites. So that's great. And I was interested that you were talking about generating a dictionary of vague language, which could be very useful. And even more useful, generating a score to measure vague language and ambiguity, even industry by industry, so to allow for comparisons. But one thing I wasn't sure about is, are you just confined to the privacy policy? Because you know that we're all very keen on layered notices now and things, and documents can be scattered all the way around the website, you know, the notices of this and that, the other. Can your machine learning, can your volunteers, are they looking outside the privacy policy as well as inside it?
So the techniques and tools can be used on any privacy language. Now, locating the language is one challenge that we have. If it's in the form of a privacy policy, and the privacy policy has to be at, say, the middle of the bottom, page of a website without scrolling down, that's easier for us. So that is a challenge if it's scattered about. One thing that we've also we've had to grapple with is you can't pick and choose this provision of privacy policy and then 3 paragraphs down there's another related provision and not consider that. in the United States, the contractual interpretation is the four corners of the document, the entire document as a whole, and what's the interpretation of the document there. So we have to approach it in that way. We can't just isolate particular provisions. And we have tried to kind of shift the subjective interpretation to the users rather than us injecting some subjective interpretation, kind of showing the user the relevant set of provisions, and then having the user take a look, and then the interpretive issues are shifted to the user there, rather than us having to, as I mentioned, the interpretive issues are present for us and for users, so we shouldn't be interpreting on behalf of everyone.
Thanks a lot. Well, we'll come back. But in a way, Thanasis, you're the bridge between Cameron and one set of technology and Kristina, because Kristina's going to tell us that she thinks dashboards are marvelous, and you've got a dashboard, so please tell us about your dashboard.
Okay, thanks for having me. Let's move on to the presentation, please. I'm here to present you the Plus Privacy tool, which empowers users to reclaim their privacy. Plus Privacy is a part of Operando project founded by the European Union and Horizon 2020. Consumer privacy exposed to multiple dangers. We will see briefly them. First is the default settings, what I like to call the Times New Roman syndrome. People who use text editors almost stick with a default and never change. And that is because the users have the illusion that the service providers and the online service providers have given in careful consideration of the default settings. There is a conflict of interest because the online service provider wants profit and users need privacy. And as consider settings, sometimes new users cannot find easily where they are and to change it. So, the big danger is, of course, user profiling with targeted ads, third-party trackers, and social media buttons. Follow the users on the web and stalk their behavior. Their personal data became a commodity traded between businesses, and the consumer, now it's the product. Another danger is the forgotten apps. We all install an app, use it once, and forget about it. The app didn't forget us. They still have access to our data. And of course, there is the excessive permissions granted on mobile apps. For example, why a flashlight app needs your location, permission for your location. The email for the users, after registering on a website, hit by a tsunami of spam emails. And it's even more dangerous when there is a data breach on the service provider to expose their membership in that service, the sensitive service. For those who know, the Ashley Madison hack, it's a dating site for married people. And last but not least, it's the malware, where it's lurking over the internet, having target our personal data. There is no the information on how to secure our privacy. It's available, but the users don't spend the time or the effort to read all this, and too long didn't read. It's a thing. We can't ignore it. Now with the GDPR is coming in a few months, business have to get ready. But what about the customers? What the consumers can do? How a consumer can easily check which personal data he's sharing and with whom. If the application have the permission agreed upon, how he can revoke his consent, anonymize himself, and apply the optimal privacy settings. With the Plus Privacy tool, we empower users to control all of their social network privacy settings easily, block advertisements and trackers, check, inspect, and control the browser extension permissions, inspect which application connected to their data, their online social data, hide their email identity, and last, do their privacy for benefit deals. Let's see, and all that from an easy and unified dashboard. It's a Chrome extension for desktop users, and also there is an iOS and Android application. The user have to make only one choice. They can, regarding his social network privacy settings. With the click of the button, the story ends with the consumer to have the optimal and privacy-friendly settings. Or he can ignore it, stay in Wonderland, and see how far their personal data can go. Let's see how this happens. On the browser, there is a click, and so far we are supporting 4 of the major social network sites. Click one button, they have to be logged on in order to happen. Okay, so with the click of the button, all the default settings are changing to the most privacy-friendly ones. Of course, users can also tweak their setting to fit their need, again from the dashboard for its social network. This part is largely based on AdBlock Plus code. We protect the consumers with ad blocking, ad tracking, removing the social media buttons, and block the malware, the known malware domains. This is where the consumer can control his browser extensions. As you can see, he can inspect the permission of any of the extensions, see the warnings, and of course, enable, disable, or delete it. There is a scale, 1 to 10, which 10 is the most dangerous one. And now we are moving on to the applications that are connected to our data. We can inspect applications that are connected to our Facebook, Twitter, Google, Dropbox, and LinkedIn data. This is the example is the case of Facebook data. So there is an application. We use the color coding with red to be the most dangerous one of what they can do with our data. The user can, with just one click, remove any redundant and privacy polluting app. Regarding the emails, we empower users with giving them 20 alternative email addresses. They can use them to register in websites. So when the email comes to this address, it's forwarded to the real email and can reply also from his email without disclosing the real email address. Of course, Plus Privacy don't keep any data. The privacy for benefit, it's still under development. We plan to allow the users to get economic benefits in exchange for access to the private data. Today, they are giving it away for free For example, you can join a site with your Facebook login and get 20% discount. Of course, there is easy-to-use interface on both mobile platforms. Our goal is to make it easy for the users. You can find out more on a dedicated web page, plusprivacy.com. It's an open source software. You can all take a look on the code, or even better, to contribute. And there is the sites, and you can follow us on Twitter, the Operado project. So that is the tool.
Thank you very much, Athanasios. Are you going to be limited just to Chrome, or are you going to open up to Firefox and Internet Explorer and Safari, or what?
It's not. So far, it's only Chrome. But as an open source software, anyone can contribute and take the code and do whatever they want. It's based on Chrome right now. The project is finishing soon, so I don't know any plans for Firefox add-ons.
Oh, okay. I'm more comfortable in Firefox, for example, with all my add-ons. So it would be quite useful if you could use not just one browser. But anyway, let me say what I think was really good about this is I love the way that you can use this automatically to set the privacy settings to maximum. I think that's really, really great, and I just hope it works as it says on the tin. And the other thing I really underlined was the way you can use it to remove junk. You know, these old apps that are sitting there and broadcasting emails, and we learned yesterday about how some emails, business to business, have got pixels in, which allow for tracking, and you said this does anti-tracking. So this has enormous potential. Just thinking about as a user, how far does your software, your dashboard, analyze the website itself? I mean, can you tell me as a consumer, this website I can trust it, or I should be suspicious, or what?
This is on where we are blocking the malware. We use a list of a community from the same that supports the Ad Plus, the Ad Blocker Plus. So, in terms of if a website have some suspicious intentions, the community already marked and blocked from Plus Privacy. Now, for a new website, we have to be careful. We can't do something. Okay. If it's not already marked as malware domain.
Right, well, these are our two technology colleagues who've told us about the products. Does anybody have a really pressing question, really just about how this works? Yeah, let's just take one question, just for clarification.
For the first presentation, Andrew Adams, Major University. On the first presentation, I just wondered, how specific is what you've used to English? I mean, I realise you said you're very focused on the US situation, but of course, even in the US, there's a lot of Spanish speakers and a fair number of other languages in use. How specific to English is the work you've done, and how generic is some of the natural language processing stuff that you've got?
The work is specific to English. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on, because we'll have time to come back and go into more detail. I'd like to pass the floor to Kristina, who's working on this marvelous Privacy Bridges project that was launched at the international conference in Amsterdam. I forget how many bridges there were. There were 10. So you're going to tell us about bridge number 2, Kristina. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for getting up early. Can I have there? I'm from the Institute of Information Law at the University of Amsterdam, and we have been commissioned with a follow-up project to the Privacy Breaches report that was published in 2015. And we have been specifically asked to identify practicable solutions to user control. So the emphasis is on practice. And I would like to also acknowledge that this was a collective effort, so my colleagues have been contributing to this report. And the research we served sponsoring from a number of companies, but that has been channeled and organized through the Center for Democracy and Technology. So let's get directly inside. Users around the world are struggling for control over their personal information, we know that. And the 2015 Privacy Breaches report recommends as one of their central pillars that there should be practical solutions that can be used across the web to signal the presence or the absence of consent, as well as compliance with other legal requirements where this is relevant. The outcome should be usable technology, resulting in enhanced user control over how data about them is collected and used. And we grounded our research on 3 premises, building on this previous report. First of all, user controls, in order to have an impact, should correspond with the current landscape of online services offered to users and be also cognizant of the platform and the app economy. That user controls are inevitably socio-technical systems which must be designed in the interest of users in order to advance privacy as a value. And finally, they must be flexible to accommodate the differences between different privacy laws around the world, and this would also actually require that we move away from focusing really on the various differences between privacy laws, but try to actually bridge, that's why it's called privacy bridges, and seek out the commonalities. So the idea is that there are user controls that work regardless of jurisdiction, citizenship, and the location of the data. And this is possible, and we have been identifying a number of strategies that would actually aid this outcome, and they are actually not that ingenious. The first one is that you need to consolidate the requirements of different privacy laws, and in the end it only matters if the laws require a user control element, whether this is now designed as a consent, or it is designed as a choice element in the form of some sort of opt-out, doesn't really matter as long as there's a chance of users to make a determination. A second strategy we call customize, which means that you can customize default settings to reflect the differences in jurisdictions and thereby create one user control mechanism that nevertheless can be used across different jurisdictions. And should there be, that's the third measure, still some discrepancies that cannot be otherwise bridged, the third measure would be to upgrade the protection afforded by a user control mechanism to the benefit of the users and their trust, and basically afford users a bit more, even though their national or local law does not essentially require that. But that, of course, is dependent on goodwill. And the last one, the fourth measure, is privacy by design. That has been already often discussed also here at this conference, and privacy by design only means to, in this context of user controls, to reduce the reliance on personal data without compromising essentially the business model, and thereby also reduce the amount of legal discrepancy that can arise in this context. We also made an effort to actually map all the state of research on user controls, and I also had to move out of my comfort zone as a lawyer and look at many different disciplines, because in the digital environment, user controls arise from the interplay of really many different conditions. These are partly technical, but also connected to different aspects of user behavior, design and usability research, as well as privacy governance that exists today. So these insights from a wide range of disciplines have been grouped in 4 dimensions that we have then, just for the sake of navigating through these different groups, dubbed as architecture, that is basically the IT, agency, that is what users need to get, but also how realistically they can exercise control and want to exercise control. Attitude is the business premise and also the compliance effort and accountability effort of the providers. And finally, authority. Authority is the regulator, is the law, and also how different networks of regulators can influence privacy governance. So overall, it emerges that effective user control requires a number of user-centric virtues, linking technology, design, and usability with the appropriate legal defaults. Behavioral research makes a strong argument in favor of privacy-preserving defaults, as well as scalable and persistent privacy controls, as was recommended also by the Privacy Bridges report we are building on. And now you will understand why it is so fantastic to sit next to Thanasis with the Privacy Plus, because we actually have been casting a lot of privacy and user control mechanisms in the field of privacy, and there are wonderful innovations out there and wonderful ideas and initiatives. And yet we were running that through our cast of these different requirements, what makes effective user control, what fits today, and what users actually want to navigate and what makes it easier for them. And we arrived at the conclusion that at the present moment, privacy dashboards present the most realistic scenario that is attuned to the online, mobile, platform, and the IoT economy and has gained significant traction in the market. Privacy dashboards are kind of user interfaces that provide a single point of access to information on the collection and use of personal data, as well as the configuration of the privacy settings by the user. Conceptually, privacy dashboards can be designed to meet privacy by design and usability criteria, and via the configuration of the default settings, they can be adjusted to meet different legal requirements. The research did, of course, not involve a direct technical or organizational check of existing privacy dashboards, but we think that as a strategy, it is the most potent, because we think that for users, privacy dashboards that scale their ability to make settings across a wide variety of services and apps, precisely as what has been introduced earlier with Privacy Plus, this is really the most promising, that you have one suite of options and of settings that make things easy, and especially having a button make it the most privacy friendly. That is certainly the most desirable. Which brings me to the end of the presentation, and I think we can see more from the Privacy Bridges project in the near future. We are working now on the Transparency Bridge, which is very important when we are discussing the information that users get.
Thank you very much, Kristina. And in fact, you raised the question which we can come back to with Cameron and Thanasis. If I can just ask you to make a note of this. Could your projects be adapted to, in one case, move from US law more broadly, EU law, whatever? Your project, the dashboard, is very much posited on the EU law, I think, Thanasis. So could that have a broader scope? But I just put that into when we have a more of a general discussion. You said, Kristina, that what you would like to see is a flexible approach to all the different national laws, and the Bridges is about looking out for commonalities between the different legal systems. Well, where can I, if I'm one of these two gentlemen and I've got this program, where do I look? Is it enough for me to say, okay, this is fine with the Hong Kong law, or this really works for me in Buenos Aires? Is that enough, or do I take the GDPR as the gold standard? I mean, what in practice do I need to do if I'm one of these gentlemen looking out for these commonalities?
What helps is, of course, having the attitude to try to make things work, first of all, instead of basically lamenting the occasional inconsistencies between different privacy laws. It is actually possible to focus on making and creating and designing meaningful user controls, and trying to find solutions that are able to bridge these different jurisdictions and legal systems. And this is possible when you focus on the control element. If this is finally then activated as an opt-in or opt-out choice, it doesn't matter, because you have to design this tool, and when the tool is nicely designed, and setting the defaults can be different, or you even grant everyone in your customer base the best possible solution, which means that they have an active choice in the beginning.
Do either of you guys want to intervene at this stage, just to react to these comments? No?
It seems that our project is more, we have the choice element, but geared towards the transparency prong, as you pointed out.
May I add something? In Plus Privacy, we give the power to user to select what he thinks it's best for him. So it's not about a law, GDPR, or something else. It's about the user.
No, that's very helpful for me understanding. You're really looking at it from the user's approach, and what do I need as a user?
If I may very briefly add, we also should not overwhelm users with settings and choices. Most users want it simple. They don't want to micromanage their privacy. They want to rely on that things are staying permanently set unless they want to make a change. And when you have like these wonderful dashboards where you have to all the time make settings, and this is a non-stop social activity basically, that is not the outcome, that is not bringing us further. Users want it simple, and having like one bottom that says, I want to align privacy settings to a most privacy-preserving option, that is great. Or restore default, or like make it simple, straightforward, and make it work across many different services and apps, and not one by one by one.
Yeah, and ideally with a trigger that when there's an update, they're always being updated, these things, that the software you're using says, hey, this has changed, you need to think about it. Well, now we move to our fourth speaker, but definitely not last but not least. People think maybe being a regulator is boring, but Florence is living proof that at least the CNIL is fun and cool, and she's going to prove this to us with a couple of clips to start off her presentation. Florence.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you also to the organizer for this wonderful conference, and it's also very enjoyable to come to the Cpdp. Just before giving you to give you some insight about what the CNIL is doing in terms of public awareness and kind of a user tool that we are currently developing, maybe just to give you my first reactions to what have been presented. And first of all, to congratulate you for your imagination and for your creativity. I mean, it's amazing what you have put in place, and it's definitely things that needs to be supported. Cameron, what you have done is really interesting for the users in order to provide more readiness to privacy policies. It can also be useful for the regulator in a certain way when we are, for example, conducting a sweep and where we are scanning many websites on the internet, and so privacy policies. And so to a certain extent, this kind of tool might be interesting for privacy regulators, knowing that also not everything is can be covered through algorithm. It can help in order, in fact, to flag or to spot some potential violation. But it's true that not everything can be covered with this kind of tool. For example, the proportionality of processing or the legal basis that is used for certain processing, this kind of thing does not necessarily can be checked through software, but it can be really useful, again, to have a first layer. I know that some Asian colleagues, privacy enforcement authorities right now are also thinking about developing software in order to massively scan the internet, and to check the compliance with their own law. So that's really a good trend. And about what you have done, Thanasis, also and also with the Privacy Breach project. I mean, it's really impressive, and that's definitely something that should help the user to better control his or her privacy on the internet. And we should really use the GDPR as an opportunity, as really a chance to think about those new innovative technologies for the users. I mean, there are in the GDPRs many aspects, new principles that can be that are in fact for a better protection of the users. For example, like the portability right, which is not totally new. I mean, it's derived from the access right, but it's something that is very important and that should be marketed in a certain way, and where you can have also innovative tools that can be developed to apply this principle. I was at the International Forum of Cybersecurity on Wednesday, and we got a very interesting presentation from Quant, also on the portability and the way that they put that in practice. So there are plenty of projects right now designed for the users, and definitely we need to support and to underline the quality of those projects. Also, it's really, in fact, also a perfect timing, because we have this GDPR text, but now we need to put flesh on the bone, so we need to develop the technologies in order to implement the GDPR. We are right now in the implementation phase, so it's perfect to have this kind of initiatives in order to help the user to better control its digital life on the internet. So thank you very much for all of those projects. And maybe to give you some information, examples of what the CNIL is currently doing in terms of user awareness with respect to his privacy. We have developed 3 tools. The first 2 tools are more about awareness, and the last one is more about control for the users. I will show you some videos. I want to warn you, they are going very fast, and some, I think one of it is in French. So, but it's in the process to be translated in English. I will explain to you what we have tried to do, and after we will look at the videos. So the first video, it's called the Oracle of the Net. It's in fact, it has been developed by the Digital Innovation Lab of the CNIL. We are really lucky. We have a Digital Innovation Lab looking at new technologies, and also with a designer, an external designer. And this tool, you will see, is very interesting because it helps, in fact, to scrub the internet and to understand what's going on behind what a user sees on the internet. So it helps to understand the algorithm, the software that are behind what is showed on the internet. For example, whether or not there is predictive analysis done on a certain type of information we put on the internet. So if you can please launch the first video. No, that's not this one. It's the other one. So that's the Oracle of the Net. So in fact, really the idea is that you pass your mouse as a user on certain information that you can see on the web, and it will reveal behind what's going on and what the algorithm is really doing at the moment that you are looking at the web. And in fact, it's like a little bit a game. So more you scrub, more you win, and more you get more information about what's going on. So there is a, I mean, it's a kind of, it's supposed to be fun. And it helps, again, when scrubbing to get information. For example, if there is a cookies that is put behind what the cookies is really doing with the information. So that's the whole idea of this oracle of the net. So you can see, you can get on YouTube and look at the video, and you will get more information on, and you have your own experience on that. Also, we have done another tool that it's called CookieViz. It's an open source software. It has been also developed by the Digital Innovation Lab. The idea of CookieViz is really to enable users to visualize in real time the cookies and the other online tracking technologies that are being placed when they browse on the internet. So maybe if you can launch the second video. So it goes very fast, don't worry. But I will help you to understand what's going on. So on the right side, you have your navigation on the internet, your browsing. On news, on websites, news website, e-commerce, different type of website. And you see on the left side, the flow of information collected by the way of cookies placed on the website, and also where the information goes. And it goes to a myriad of actors, which is something that internet users are not necessarily aware when they browse on the internet. So the tool is there to help in understanding the impact and the extent of the hidden side of their browsing path. And we calculate that with just 3 browsing experience, 3 websites visited, in total you have 50, 60 actors behind that will get the information on your browsing experience. So that's the second tool that we have developed. It's open source like the first one. Now, let's talk about the last one. If you can put the slide, the last slide. It's about delisting request from search engine. We created, in fact, a tool where you can check the effectiveness of the delisting request. So you can check by using your name whether or not the search engine have deleted your information on the web, not necessarily just on the first page, but also from the other page of the search result. So it makes, it's easier for the individual to control exactly the efficiency of its request to be delisted. And again, it will work on all of the page of the search result. So that's the 3 tools that we have been developing for the users. We are also developing, but that's not the subject of today, a lot of tools for controllers, public sector and private sectors, and we just launched recently a DPA tool that we also encourage you to look at on the website of the CNIL, and it's a software that you can use in order to evaluate your risk, the risk of your processing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florence, and thank you for talking us through the clips. I watched them yesterday, and they certainly do go very fast. In a way, I'm now starting to get a feel, you say in English, horses for courses, what these programs can be used for. I mean, Kristina has said the dashboard is really the way to go for consumers in terms of you go in and it does the work for you, which is great. What you're really getting at, Florence, is the usable privacy project, I think, for being useful, because if it can identify deceptive advertising, if it can find vagueness, if it can give scores, it's great when you do your, if the Article 29 or the future board does a sweep, this can highlight the bodies that should be looked at. So you can see that this is great for regulators. But just to say, I think there still is a role for usable privacy for individuals. The dashboard is you put it in and you use it. It works at the beginning, and then you rely on it. Whereas yours is live, it's happening all the time, isn't it? Every time I go on a new website. So how does this work with mobile devices? You said that, there's a thing, but a mobile device, it's going to come up on screen, and it's very small, and I'm not going to spend hours looking at it. In the privacy community, we're very keen on layered notices. There's the short notice, the condensed notice, the full notice. I'm not even sure most users are really going to be wild about a shortness notice. Are you thinking about things like icons, for example? Would that be a way to go?
So I think it's a compound question. So in terms of the limited ability for mobile, or even it's more limited with the Internet of Things to provide this notice in a different time. The techniques that we're developing and have developed, I think, would be especially useful. With the second part of your question, with icons. So we've put a lot of thought into icons. And if you get a focus group of users and say, would it be helpful for you to have a red light, a yellow light, and a green light, right? They'll say, oh yes, that would be very helpful, right? But the complexity of data practices, that's way too simplistic to have a red light or yellow light or green light. Then you get into to selection of criteria, right? What's the criteria, the basis for the red light? Are they all weighted the same? Are all the criteria weighted the same? So it's difficult to actually do that with accuracy. If you have a set of icons that's really robust enough to get into the complexity of the various data practices, then you have a slew of them, right? That's going to take a lot of user education to be able to explain what they mean. So that was a very negative way of approaching it, but we're actually, one of the things we've been doing, I didn't have a chance to mention it in my presentation, but thank you, Chris, for bringing it up, is a positive way forward with icons and trying to develop a framework for successful deployment of icons or any type of indicator of privacy quality.
No, it'd be great to see, because now in the GDPR we've got Article 12, which says that icons can be used to help users appreciate the information that's being provided, and it even gives the Commission delegated powers to legislate on what an icon should look like and how it should work. So I think the icons are coming. I'd like to open up the conversation to the floor now. Does anybody have any questions for we've already got one. And if you have a question, then just come up to the microphone as we've been doing, and we'll take them.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for your presentations. My name is Ine van Zeelen from the Smith Research Center here in Brussels. And I was wondering if any of you had looked at consent for or from children, or in the US situation, COPPA requirements.
So our project is specific to notice and choice, but mapping against requirements is helpful. And so we do have, one issue we have that would be a difference with the GDPR is silence is permissive generally in the US, but not with respect to COPPA. So that's an instance where you would need verifiable parental consent in order to collect the data from the outset, right? So it's a general project assisting. We have this system that's not very effective in the US, right? It's basically, it's not effective. So we're trying to solve this problem first, but I think having the legal requirements in place would be helpful for us and for our techniques, because then we'd be able to have some tangible standards to map them to. right? And so in terms of the GDPR, I mean, that's an example of you have this granularity as to data practices and no silence for consent, unbundled consent, right? So that's helpful in terms of our techniques and tools.
Chris, I'm sorry.
Florence.
Just one thing about this matter. So right now, you know that there are a lot of discussion at national level about the age that will be inserted in the national law with respect to children. In France, for example, we heard yesterday that the National Assembly is more in favor of 15 years old, and that the Ministry of Justice proposed initially 16. So there are some debates about the age. It's a really it's a key issue. It's a very important issue. It's a little bit complicated because the GDPR gives some room of maneuver. So we might end up with different age depending on the countries. And also what is very important to stress out is the applicable law. And that's not necessarily very easy to see in the national text, but you will have not only the age, but also which law will be applicable, so whether it will be the children law or whether the establishment law. And depending on the countries, they don't necessarily choose the children law. It can be also the establishment law, so it doesn't necessarily mean that it will apply in the country, because it depends also on the establishment. So that will be a complicated, I guess, completed implementation for the actors. But just to also to stress out that when we were discussing this item at the Working Party 29, because we issued some guidelines also on transparency, and right now they've been open for public consultation. We just closed this week the deadline for public consultation, but that was also an item that was discussed at the Working Party 29, and we had some also problems to get some feedback from external, not necessarily the internet actors, but more from also the civil society, from project leaders funded by the Commission. I mean, to have some insights on the impact for children, the risk, and how to better assess this specific context, and so to have the right, and so to give the right guidelines according to this particular and sensitive type of processing. So it's true that it would be very interesting to have more thoughts and more initiatives on children. That would be very helpful for the regulators.
Thanks, Florence. Do you want to come back and put your question, Pat? No? Okay. Then what I'll do is I'll just say to members of the panel, you know, what have we learned from this? Where are we going to go forward with this? Would you all like to just give us a few final thoughts? Starting with you, Cameron.
You know, as the only American on the panel, the applicability of our research project to international regimes is not into foreign languages is something that we haven't really thought a lot about. You know, we've kind of tried to tackle this notice and choice regime of governance that we have in general, and haven't. So this has really been thought-provoking for me. You know, our project's funded by the National Science Foundation, a federal grant, and so we're kind of cabined to a United States point of view. But you know, personally, and I know I'm speaking on behalf of other academics on my research team, that it's an interesting thing to think about how others outside of the United States and others speak different languages might benefit from the techniques, and I think that the techniques and tools may provide value in outside of the United States.
Thank you. Thanasis.
I think user awareness is a big issue, that users must have the tools to know what's happening, because now I think they don't really understand the dangers they are into. So for me, it's we must educate the users somehow with easy tools or somehow.
Kristina.
So very briefly, I learned that there are a lot of wonderful initiatives out there, and that we have to protect them, and also the independence and of the user to adopt the tools they want, so that these initiatives are not at the mercy of operating systems and platforms, app stores and so on, but that users can adopt them. And I will certainly have fun in airbrushing websites, and it would be great if after this information I could also disable things if I don't like them, if that connects with choice. Thank you.
Florence.
Thank you. I think that it's what's going on right now. It's really positive, and again, congratulations for what you have done. And that's it shows that we are in a very in a transition moment, and that finally the user will have some, as you said, he's easy to use, simple tools, because that's really the problem. It's to transform a complex matter, a technical matter, into a easy and simple thing for the users. And so thanks to you, we may finally manage to achieve this objective. Thank you.
Great. Well, if I just sum up, I think if I'm a consumer, I hope this technology is going to give me a tool that I can look at very quickly and very simply and decide if I want to use this product. I think if I'm a company, if I'm an accountable company, then I'm going to be looking at these scores, and I'm going to be trying to adjust to come into line, I reckon. And if I'm a regulator, I mean, things like the cookie sweep, we did in the EDPS a sweep of the EU bodies to see what they were doing. To have these scores available would be great to highlight where we should start, and maybe even just to send a letter to those organizations and say, well, we've noticed that you're not scoring very well on this. This could be 20% effort, 80% results for regulators. It could be quite good. So, please, thank you very much, and I hand it back to our chair.
Many thanks to our panelists for this fruitful discussion. This brings our session to the end. Thank you again very much. Thanks to the audience for their participation and their attention.